There's not really much of a... Alrighty.
You all set? All right, good evening, everybody. This is the Planning Commission meeting, April 16th, and tonight we are going to talk about the Mallett's Bay Initiative. Sarah, you're on.
Sure. So I think tonight was meant to be sort of an overview. The Select Board has given you the charge to review and analyze options to address the lack of effective wastewater disposal capacity on the Inner Bay. And I think what I wanted to lay the groundwork for is just a really quick overview of some of the history, take you through some of the reports, have you ask questions. This meeting and the next meeting is sort of going to be dedicated to giving you some overview. Next meeting will focus more on specifically wastewater itself, regulations, details, enforcement, solutions for on-site community, the whole gamut. So I think what we tried to do tonight is to focus on what is the Mallett's Bay Initiative, where did this all come from, and sort of walking back in staff notes back through to the 1960 town plan that sort of first looked at some issues within the Inner Bay and wastewater. Moving into the 1980s, when at that time the Army Corps had jurisdiction over the state waters, and Colchester felt that we need to have a higher level of regulation along the lake. We worked with the state of Vermont to get the state jurisdiction over the waters of Lake Champlain there in Vermont. And later on in the 1980s, there was the Mallett's Bay Advisory Committee that was formed that looked at a lot of these issues in terms of water quality. And it was what the Harbor Master program came out of, our current police boat enforcement. And there was still consideration at that point of, do we take jurisdiction over the waters of the bay from the state? That was something that in the 1990s was looked at, and the select board at the time decided not to pursue that sort of specific delegation from the state. We still have a harbor master, which is from Colchester PD, that polices the bay for the state's regulations and works with the state on enforcement of the state's regulations. Moving on into the 1990s, there's the Village on the Bay initiative that took a look at land use planning in the bay, and that was around the same time that the late 1990s sewer initiative was begun to look at bringing wastewater into the bay. And then we bring you up into the 2000s, and I'm just moving through very quickly the timeline that's in your staff notes. And there was, in 2003, we hired David Spitz as a land use consultant to begin to take a look at the sewer bond vote failed. People had concerns. They didn't think that the Village on the Bay was the correct initiative at that time, or the correct solution. What are some other viable alternatives? And that was fleshed out a little bit more in 2007. We did a concept plan for West Lakeshore Drive with the municipal planning grant. Again, there was at that time some lingering questions about transportation, whether or not we'd have the Cirque Highway, what was our capacity for any additional traffic within this corridor. So that was something that we continue to work on. Sort of simultaneously to this, in 2003, back when we were holding the Future of Lakeshore Drive forums, there was a strategic water quality plan project that was done. It was a very limited, smaller scope one, taking a look at what are our water quality issues in Colchester. So parallel paths, you have taking a look at specifically the Inner Bay land use planning, and this other group over here that is taking a look at water quality initiatives in the town. The recommendations of that report were to further look sort of town-wide at wastewater solutions, stormwater solutions. And out of that became what was called eventually, mouthful, sorry, Integrated Water Resources Management Plan. That was Environmental Protection Agency grant that was given to the town to really take a look more probatively at all of Colchester, wastewater concerns, septic concerns, townwide water quality concerns, mapping a lot of our natural resources. And that took over really It was a larger project that really was in full swing for 5 years, but that was an initiative that was more of a decade solution. So parallel paths, skipping back over to land use. 2007, we take a look and we sort of identify a vision for specifically the West Lakeshore Drive area, sort of stymied by, we're not sure how we can implement a plan without knowing specifically what we're going to have for traffic or transportation improvement. Skipping ahead, the CERC dies, which was that bypass road through the bay. It was determined that any sort of bypass road was going to be tens of millions of dollars, 10 to 15 million a mile back in several years' time. It wasn't viable to take a look at bypass roads or anything of that nature. So taking a look at what we have, we applied for another municipal planning grant and then began the 2014-2015 effort, which we sort of looked at as being called the Mallets Bay Initiative. Taking a look at everything in its context, what do we want the bay to be? Some things are going in the background at this time. You have the 2014 Town Plan, the 2013 Economic Development Action Plan, and the 2012 Heritage Plan. Heritage Plan was a really grassroots strategic plan for the town. A lot of people were involved with that outside of government. And it had an action item of identify existing town-owned assets and the potential resources for improving Colchester water-based tourism, community recreational opportunities. Such assets may include undeveloped land, underdeveloped land, conceptual plans previously created, including but not limited to the village on the Mallets Bay. So there was going at this time of, geez, we really need to stop doing we need to stop studying things and we need to do something. We need to find a land use plan once and for all. So in 2015, with this new municipal planning grant, moving forward, looking at the bay, we hired regional planning to take a look at traffic and to give us projections in terms of what were our limitations. And we evaluated transportation infrastructure, bike ped infrastructure. Simultaneously, the AARP actually got involved and did a walking study of the corridor in terms of pedestrian mobility, bicycle mobility, and what were some of our deficiencies in that area. So there's a lot of good information coming through at this time. And Colchester Fire District 2 began looking at a sewer option again. So we concluded our land use planning efforts 2015, 2016, and we created 2 new zoning districts, Lakeshore 1, Lakeshore 2, which are for the West Lakeshore Drive portion of the Inner Bay. And we had sort of that as a component of what was a larger Mallets Bay initiative at that time. It was the whole gamut of, yes, we have a land use plan, but we're also going to address transportation, we're going to address bike ped, we're going to address stormwater, and we are looking into what to do with wastewater. Bringing that up to the current day, within the past year, Fire District 2 decided that they were not going to pursue the sewer project anymore. And they were looking at all Pineberg Prim into the bay and then out to Goodsell Point, a fairly large area, and servicing it via the Burlington treatment facility. The town picked up the project afterwards and said, well, let's once and for all look at this and see if we can have a scaled back version that might be viable. And they scaled it back to West Lakeshore Drive, East Lakeshore Drive, and Goodsell Point. And that was what was on the ballot in March. On the heels of the defeat of that ballot item, and looking at all the things that we have going on with the Mallets Bay Initiative, in terms of the community's will and drive to address water quality holistically, as well as that the bay is a resource for all, you have been given this task to look very specifically at the human waste pollution issue of this. So this is, we need to put you in a box. We need to contain you and have you look at a very specific issue. But I think it's definitely, and looking at this specific issue, because you guys, as part of our planning commission, looking at a long-term plan where we're going with the larger vision is, need to know that there's a lot of work and effort that's been going on in the background. And you aren't being asked to reinvent the wheel. You're being asked to look at this one particular issue out of a much bigger picture. So that's sort of the Mallets Bay Initiative overview. And what I tried to do too, for people that want to do more of a deep dive, we have in the Dropbox, and as I said, I can get those to you in other ways. Maybe I'll print Bob copies if you want. Tell me which ones so I don't print them all. But we have the Integrated Water Resources Management Plan, whole 879 pages. We have the executive summaries. We have probably the presentation. 50-slide presentation is perhaps the best summary of that. I'm working on getting you a much more narrowed down, like a 10-page executive summary on it. We also have what's been going on with some of the recreation planning, some of the transportation planning, stormwater, so that you at least have these resources available to you as you move forward to see what's being addressed and how. Because I think there are lots of questions that came out the community in terms of, what are you doing with stormwater? Is this a priority for you? What are you going to do about transportation, the intersection? A lot of people are very passionate about the bay, and to be able to let you and educate you and let you speak to these issues. So I've done enough rambling in terms of an overview, and I think if you have questions or want to go into some of the documents, I'm more than happy to do that. And again, it'll be tonight in the next meeting, the first meeting in May, it's May 7th. So if you have some questions that we can't answer tonight, we'll look into trying to answer them for that meeting. And just tentatively, I think I put this in staff notes too, May 20th, we're looking at being a public forum. So your second meeting in May, instead of being on the 21st, will be on the 20th. We're looking at the high school cafeteria, so I don't know if we can go live from there. But we will try and have a larger forum to solicit the public's input about this particular issue and what their concerns are, and further refining our scope of what we need to address and how we're going to address it.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I'm opening the floor for questions. Go ahead. Bob, anything right off the top of your head? No? Zach, anything off the top of your head? It's a lot to, yeah, I'm sure you'll have some. Sarita, next?
I'm just wondering if we will also look at the economic, kind of how much tourism or Mallets Bay contributes, and clean water contributes to all of Colchester in terms of revenues.
That's not part of our project scope, so we will not be looking at that.
Okay.
I'm not sure that there is a firm number that could be provided. But it's definitely, if you take a look at, in terms of where it is for a priority, I encourage you to take a look at the Heritage Plan. It is one of the, I think, 10 recommendations of the Heritage Plan. It's been very prevalent in a lot of our planning with the town plans in terms of being a resource for the larger community, both boaters as well as people that go swimming, fishing.
Mark?
I submitted some questions that Sarah said you get to at the next meeting. So they were kind of just like a sanity check on how expensive this project is. And my numbers were like 14 million into 260 homes with something like over 50,000 per home. And probably all of those homes don't need new sewers. So it's, only half of those. It's over 100,000 per home. And I think that might be why it got defeated. It just seemed too expensive. I don't know if you had any, back of the envelope kind of thoughts.
Not at this point. We're going to get into specific septic sewer questions on May 7th.
Rebecca?
I guess I'm waiting for the information on May 7th.
Okay.
Everybody's looking forward to the scoop on the poop.
Scoop. You heard it here first, folks.
I think a lot of this process is going to be educational first. They've spent a lot of time and energy doing studies, getting thoughts, getting plans. If we get caught up and understand everything, I think we can help make decisions that work well for the future as well as current. Clean water is imperative to everybody from critters to us, so it all comes into play. I think it's education first, to learn all the things and time and energy we have spent.
So the fire district number 2, they decided not to do it.
That's right.
They decided not to do it because of the cost.
You wanna take that?
I think there are multiple factors. Cost was definitely part of it. It was over a $20 million project, I believe, when it was part of the fire district's efforts.
But that would serve more than what was on Lakeshore Drive.
Correct.
That's right, that was coming up Heineberg, Prim, and then going over, so this is redirecting a little bit differently.
Yeah, but
And then
you can
the,
see $20 million, if it's servicing a lot more homes, it might be more cost effective.
well, a new development occurred whereby the North End plant was looking to raise to a tertiary level of TMDL treatment, which was going to be an unknown cost factor, which was gonna add into that being the wastewater treatment facility, so that started to be, I think, more unknowns and more costs than was originally projected when they started. They started working that, what, in 98, I wanna say, 98. And then then the head of their, the fire district 2 left, and the town inherited the project. Picked it up. I think their prudential committee decided not to pursue it any farther. Rich, anything?
I'm all good.
This is-
We'll see what happens on May 7th,
Yeah.
I guess.
It's a vast amount of information, there's a lot of history here, as Sarah so well encapsulated it and summarized for you, but and I think those slides, Sarah, will be helpful, as I was going back to all the IWRM presentations and looking at the slides that I had and seeing how it evolved from their first presentation to their final conclusion. That'll be very helpful for everybody that hasn't seen that presentation. Good. I guess you guys are waiting for May
Well,
7th?
Well, I think it would be helpful to know, because it was great that Mark sent his list of questions in advance, and if there are some additional questions on septic, I think yours are very comprehensive, so thank you, but if there are more, definitely let us know. I'm going to have Denise Johnson-Turk, who's our wastewater official, so she's the person that goes out and does test pits if there's a failed system. She's also our health officer, and she knows the ins and outs of a lot of our on-site wastewater rules. So not that you necessarily have to have all your questions in advance, but if there's some that you'd like us to research too. I think Mark had some great ones about enforcement, but what else can we be answering for you?
How many years are we contracted to have the stuff off-site and sent to another town? Is it a 20-year contract? Is it 30-year? Because we're sending everything to another wastewater facility, correct?
So how long of a contract do we have with the other town?
Exactly. Is it a 10-year contract? Is it 20 years? Is there gaps in how much it can go up?
That's a good question.
Is with South Burlington, correct?
Yep.
I wouldn't be mind interested in how Mills Point septic systems compare to what could be done down here in East Lake Shore. They went year round.
Yep.
And I doubt we can even come up with a cost, but
So will Denise kind of also explain the systems that are out there?
She can, if you
Okay.
want to.
That might be good, what's out there and maybe what is kind of beyond, new technology,
So this is gonna be a little bit of a crash course. I'm thinking at some point to, and perhaps before, this is just an idea, we did, back when we were doing the Mallets Bay Initiative in 2015 with the zoning, we did a walking tour of West Lakeshore Drive. And that was very informative and people pointed things out along the way. It might be nice prior to our meeting on the 20th, doing a little bit of a walking tour or two, and if we can, taking our time and looking at some of the septics out there. Because I think we can talk about septics in here, but sometimes getting out on site, popping lids open,
That sounds
That's,
Fresh Vermont air.
you know, I think there's a lot to it, so it's going to be a little bit more of an ongoing, and we'll try and give you a crash course on the 7th on just wastewater, but there's going to be a lot more than I think we can get into any one particular night.
We talked, yesterday I talked a little bit with you about some of my questions, but I think one of the things that concerned me was the perception that this was gonna explode growth in the bay. So it'd be really helpful, I think, to understand what the full build-out would be in the bay. You know, if, let's say, a sewer went in, like, you know, are those fears, you know, justified, or is there a limit to growth along West and East Lakeshore Drive?
So, Planning Commission just a couple years ago created the zoning that sort of put limitations on what you can build regardless of sewer or septic for West Lakeshore Drive. The zoning for East Lakeshore Drive is actually one of your town plan action items for within the next 2 years taking a look at. And so that is on your docket of things to look at over the next year or two. For, I think, a very similar process to what we went through over on West Lakeshore Drive. Massing, runoff, views, what have you. But the zoning drives what you get for a build-out. Infrastructure is just an accelerant or deterrent. It slows things down or speeds things up. You really do want to think through with your zoning and the plan, what do you want to see happen? It's just a matter of how quickly you're going to get there. So,
I thought the summary for the Lake Shore districts was, kind of made it clear of what you
Yeah,
could
I
and couldn't build out.
For some reason, I couldn't, you know, I got the study, but I couldn't
You get this one?
find, no. I didn't go to clerk base, which I probably should have.
No,
thought
it's in
about-
Dropbox.
Yeah, mine was, so.
we need to make sure your Dropbox is working, because you said you couldn't find something, which I found.
I found the studies, all the different summaries, like the 4 or 5 different summaries of the studies, and I read one of those, the general one, but I couldn't find like the staff notes.
Yeah, let's take a look at your iPad after the meeting.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not good.
Couple questions. In 2013, LCI, remember we had questions about the boaters and them getting rid of their waste? And LCI had that Lake Champlain Arc, and they were gonna collect the effluent from the boaters. I don't know if I don't think that program's still in place. That's a good question for us. Maybe for James, as opposed to LCI. But I think they tried that in 2013 to be a portable repository for boater wastewater.
I don't know, but there is state funds that go to the marinas to offer people free pump outs
Pump outs, yeah.
Yeah.
for their
The other
boats.
thing, one of my friends who's a big boater said people who spend time under boats on the lakes, they know now it's a limited resource, and it's not like it used to be even 10 years ago, that those aren't the people you have to worry about. So I thought that was some interesting information from somebody who boats a lot.
Yeah, that's good anecdotal, because the boater.
The boater himself, he spends so much time, and this is what he's about, and so he's not going to.
Yeah, yeah. Also, in the I believe it's IWRM, I'd be interested to know where that 6,499 cluster system is, gallons per day cluster system. There's only one, I guess. You know where that is?
So it's either the school or Marble Island.
Okay. Maybe not one.
They both have indirect discharge permits, so they're both over that 5,000 gallons per day.
Okay. And to go to the Mills Point question, there was at one time a suggestion for a pilot project out there for on-site inspection, but I don't think that ever came to fruition.
So there was a pilot project that was done to look at community systems back in, I think, 2000, 2002.
Yep. Would be that. They were gonna do an
We're
on-site.
gonna have to get the
ins-
dust off that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
But
And as a matter of fact, when you talk about Thompson Point, I think Mills Point looked at Thompson as an alternative, and it wasn't gonna fly,
No.
so.
Well, Thompson is a seasonal system,
mhm.
I'm sure
really
not. Yeah.
saying.
At the time that Mills Point was looking at it, the mix wasn't quite as a year-round as it currently is, but. Well, I guess we got plenty to chew on. Sarah's open to take your questions by email or however you want to send them to her. Denise will tell us more specificity about our new favorite subject.
So
Food
I
to
think
funk.
to lay the groundwork, there's on-site systems, which is what you probably, most of you have at your homes. And actually, all of you have at your homes. I haven't been Googling and spying on you, but you're all on-site systems. So that is everything under, I think it's like 5,000 or 6,000 gallons per day. And so the majority of systems that we have in Colchester fall under that rule. Then there's what's called indirect discharge, which is a community system, which is that larger system that's designed to handle anything more than that 5,000 or 6,000 gallon threshold. And so that would be a Thompson's Point. As I said, the high school is a good version of that. There's one out Marble Island on the old resort that serves many of the condos. So we do have examples of both in Colchester. And then there's sewer. Those are sort of your three options of different types of systems. We have a variety of types of systems in Colchester. There were some that were put in prior to the 1967 on-site wastewater rules going into effect in Colchester. There are some that we have no record of that I'd put into the same spot. There are some that did obtain a local permit sometime between 1967 and when the state took jurisdiction over everything in around 2005, 2006. So then there's July 1st, 2007 rolls around. The state took jurisdiction over absolutely everything for on-site wastewater. So if you have a single-family home and you are on 15 acres of land, you never need a septic permit before, you need to replace, you're going to trigger a state wastewater permit. There used to be a bunch of things back prior to then in terms of exemptions. If you had 10.1 acres of land and were in a town that didn't have any local on-site wastewater regulations, you could have a pipe going out to the ditch. There was a lot that was not regulated by on-site wastewater prior to 2007. Colchester, because we established a local program in 1967, had a legacy of requiring at least some sort of a local permit. Not as robust as what the state now does, but we at least have that history. So we have some history on many properties in Colchester, but not all. And so I think it's useful to know that now anything moving forward does trigger a state permit. We have jurisdiction from them locally for Colchester. Colchester and Charlotte are the two towns that do. And anything that we permit has to follow state guidelines. We don't get to make up our own rules. Vermont's not a home rule state. Sometimes we wish we could, but we have to follow the state's rules. And that includes with enforcement. So that helps give you a little bit more information to start to digest it with, too, in terms of what types of systems are out there. Are there new, different ones that we can look at? Well, the state could look at that. In order for us to allow any innovative systems, the state would have to allow it first, so.
And do we know whether the state is allowing some alternate?
Yes,
Okay.
there are a variety of them. The most prevalent that you see in Colchester are the bottomless sand filters. They look like raised flower boxes in people's yards. Small wooden type enclosures. Mark, I think, had a question?
Yeah, do we have jurisdiction just to inspect people, like go on their property and say, I want to see what you have here?
In some certain cases we do. but for the majority, we do not. It's that, I think this is with any sorts of permits or what have you, in terms of if you take out a building permit, we have a right to be on your property, to inspect for that work and to make sure that it's being done to a proper code. If you don't take out a building permit and you just do work on your property, we don't necessarily have a right to be on that property. So I'd sort of use that for similar lines for wastewater. If you have a state wastewater permit that requires, for instance, annual inspection or maintenance or something of that nature, we have a right to be on your property to witness its installation while the work's going on, and then afterwards, if there are any conditions that you're required to continue to meet. But for the most part, if you just have a regular old wastewater permit, you do the work, we don't have a right to enter back onto your property afterwards. These are good questions.
Mhm.
I have in my mind that in order to come to the proper solutions, you have to scope the problem. And if it's only 5% of the homes that are producing 90% of the problem, that's a lot different than 90% of the homes contributing, 1% of the problem. You've got a completely different problem. And it seems like, how do we get to knowing what is the source
So
of the problem?
the Integrated Water Resources Management Plan, mouthful, was concluded in 2013 or thereabouts. And so it's now 6 years old. So some work has been done since then, but hopefully what will get you in that 10-page revised executive summary is an update of, here's that distilled version of all of that work, and an update as to what things have been done since then in terms of, for instance, the stormwater utility's been put into place. We looked into Operation O&M permits. But it's task 4 of that study. So in those executive summaries that you have, look into task 4, which took a look at exactly that issue in terms of high-risk areas, what flows are what's called non-conforming or conforming, and what's the probability of failure within those areas. And they actually, as part of the Integrated Water Resources Management Plan, sent out mailers to people asking them to go on to their sites. They did on-site work. They didn't do it for everybody. They could only go to the ones that asked them to. And of that, they didn't get to all of them. But within these specific areas of Goodsell Point, East and West Lakeshore Drive, they went through an analysis by looking at specific systems, specific soil conditions, and as well as our permit history of what had been permitted and how old things were in terms of assuming that something that's 30-plus years old is probably sort of like a 30-plus-year-old refrigerator, not going to last that much longer, not in that good of a shape. So I think if everybody prior to the next meeting takes a look at that task 4 information, that will help lay the groundwork for some good follow-up questions.
We good?
Yeah, sounds like they looked at it.
Film on May 7th, is that the deal here?
Well, yeah, but in the meantime, if any of the rest of you have some good questions or follow-ups, let me know. And it's always great to have them in advance, so Denise and I can prepare a good answer for it. But definitely come to the meeting too with your questions, and we'll try and churn through them. And what I will say is Denise's expertise is at the 5,000 gallons per day or less with the regular. So particularly with what I'm calling community systems, which are those larger systems, we're phoning friends, we're asking, we're seeking out additional information. So if you have any questions on community systems, let us know in advance.
Yeah, that's good.
So this may sound like a silly point, but it dawns on me that every one of these on-site septic systems are basically a finite amount of time. It's only a question of how long before they fail, whether they're there 3 years or 23 years. If we set up the whole process throughout the bay, can people still use their existing stuff until they fail and then hook up, or is this gonna be hooked up, bing, bang, boom, we're over and done, and thank you very much?
So the way that the ballot item was proposed was that everybody was a mandatory hookup that touched the line. So every property that was directly on either side of East West Lake Shore and West Lake Shore was going to be required to hook up when it was installed.
And that would have been the case in the Heidelberg Prim.
Yeah.
Any, if I'm not mistaken, anytime you lay down that kind of utility line, it's a mandatory connection. It's like a dollar's worth, I guess, I believe. Okay.
But good questions. Septics, a fully complying septic system, well taken care of, 20 to 30 year time horizon, usually. What we have a lot of in this area are best fixes, which means that it's not fully compliant. There's some deviation from the rules, and those are come out without a guarantee in terms of time. So I think Denise can speak a little bit more specifically to that and some of the extra care that's required for some of these best fixes and whether or not people do the extra care. It really varies.
Do you know, is there like composting toilets and chemical toilets where the best fixes aren't gonna work? Are there, things that maybe aren't ideal for the homeowner, but they're gonna keep the waste out of the lake?
So even with a composting toilet, the state of Vermont makes you put in a leach field. They look at it as a flow reduction. So if you choose to put in a composting toilet, you can take a flow reduction on what you need to accommodate in your leach field. You still need to have a leach field because the state of Vermont looks at the water coming out of your sink as being the same thing as what comes out of your toilet. It doesn't distinguish between, we call it gray water when it comes out of your sink, and when it comes out of your toilet, it's black water. We handle both of them the same way. So we can't require people to do composting toilets, and there really isn't much of an incentive that the state gives for people to do that. And by saying you still have to build a full leach field and full system, you can just maybe build it a little bit smaller. Good question.
It's a shame.
Is it a try?
Oh,
Well, someone has to look at, someone's a culprit. I mean, someone is dumping their wastewater into the lake, and, they should be accountable if it's not by themselves.
I'd say that in doing years of enforcement now, it's never that sinister. It's never that intentional. And there have been over the years a variety of very well-meaning people that don't have the resources to fix things, that don't realize that they have an issue. There are lots of issues to varying degrees, but I've never seen somebody outrightly sort of do the, sinister, like,
Pipe into the
pipe
lake.
or tank dumping into the lake at night. It's never that obvious either.
We haven't been able to pinpoint anybody's, in all our studies, we can't go out and say, this property, this property, this property.
So that task force sort of does that in the Integrated Water Resources Management Plan. It talks about specific areas and not specific properties. As we become aware of specific properties, it's immediate, you have to fix it. You're going on a pump out until you fix your septic system. So there are times that State of Vermont defines a failure as either backing up into your house or surfacing, coming up onto your lawn, what have you. When it's surfacing, we can generally find out about those. The neighbors, our inspections, smells, wafting, those are pretty evident. And that can actually cause a health order where you have to apply like a lime or something to your property to get any treated untreated effluent treated, and then you have to pump out your tank and go on a regular schedule to have your septic tank pumped out every few days so that it doesn't overflow and then go into the leach field or surface again. And you have to find a solution and construct it within a certain time period. So if we did find something like that, it would be fixed. We can't like let those linger on indefinitely. You guys are gonna find out the hard way that I can talk all night about septic. It's really, I'm sorry, I think it's a fascinating topic. And it really affects Colchester. We have over 5,000 on-site wastewater systems. The majority of Colchester is served by on-site wastewater. The worst that's going to come out of this effort is people will learn more, hopefully, as a public education outreach about their septic systems, what they can do with them, what they can't, what some of the limitations on science are, and what some of the limitations on the state are, so.
But what we're looking at tonight is for 300 properties.
Roughly. It's not bigger than any one on-site system. You're going to probably be looking at community systems as being solutions. And that's why I'm saying, although I can talk about wastewater for quite a bit, there's a whole different realm of standards for those types of systems. And the state's been very helpful in giving us information. And so any information that you have that's specific to the community system, let us know.
It's not a community system, but the Vermont House, I guess is what it's called, it's on West Lake Shore Drive, it's kind of like an inn. I mean, it has like 3 rooms or something they rent out. But it seems like when we went to a walkthrough there, I think he talked about his septic system being a little different, that he was allowed to put a different system in for that piece of property. It's right there on the lake. Is there a way to find out what kind of system?
For which,
The place near
The new
Tom
bread and
Rob's,
breakfast.
Tom Rob's and
yeah,
Sallis. Is it that way? Yeah.
Yep.
With that funny metal siding on
Yeah,
it.
it's got red and has
Yeah.
galvanized siding on
it's
it.
not that different of a system.
He made it sound like it was different. It sounded like it was a leach field there.
There is, let me,
Because he had very limited
Yeah,
land there
he does.
to
It's small.
do the system for
They put in that big parking
what he
lot.
had built.
I'm pretty familiar with Marble Island. We have 87 units on one system that has 3 different leach fields. And it's an active system. It's actually in my front yard, unfortunately. There's these big vaults underground, and the effluent circulates in there, and it gets kind of pre-treated. And that, I guess, if the ground doesn't perk very well, it reduces the size of your leach field. So it's called an active system.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
big acreage wise, an acre.
Well, we have 3 different leach fields, and I think the one in front of my house is 7 acres. So maybe there's like 20 acres for 87 homes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know how big all of them are. I mean, it's also common, so it's
Sure.
hard to tell how much is dedicated to leach field, how much is just fields.
just trying to find the.
But it's,
Property
wastewater
cards
it's
system.
left over from the
Yeah.
hotel. We have like way excess capacity right now.
Oh, you
There's
do?
a good golf course and a hotel and everything
Yeah.
used to be on
If you have 20 acres for 87 houses, we're looking at 300 properties.
there.
And something similar, how much acreage you need to do community systems for so
Yeah,
many
that's
houses.
probably way overstated.
Yeah.
That's the main one. I don't know how big the other ones are.
Hold on.
You're mostly rock, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's
what,
all
Yeah.
on
it's
ledge.
all rock. They blast when they put in your, do you know?
Everyone's, yeah.
So everybody blasted, put it in, then they ran it down to your community center or sewer, I should say.
Oh, to put in that it's septic? No, I just know every time they build a house.
Yeah,
it
that's
blasted.
blasted, right.
So,
That's a new guy.
yeah, it's 76 Lakeshore Drive, and it's 3 one-bedroom units. And the description, the overall description was a mound system. $420 gallon per day wastewater disposal system. That's a mound.
Hmm.
So I don't believe that is, it's performance-based. But I don't think, it's not an innovative alternative system.
Is that the system that was there before and he just rehabbed the house?
Let me go back to,
It's an existing 3-bedroom and he just,
oh, zoomed in a little bit too much. There's a mound system, but it's, I don't know if they actually had to make any physical changes to the mound system, but,
Oh, he made it sound like he had a completely different system than what was originally there. It didn't sound like a mound system, that's what I,
How much did that system, any idea?
Well, there's some
50,000.
homework. That's
how
gonna
much
take
did
us
it
here.
cost?
Yeah.
No,
You don't
we
know?
didn't keep track.
Yeah.
We're now moving forward, trying to keep track roughly of how much these systems cost, but,
'Cause I have friends that are up in South Hero, and they have 3 camps in a row. They go from 75,000, 90,000, 130,000, but they just put it in the last 5
for
years.
each one of their systems?
For each one of their systems. right?
Progressively?
Yep.
Huh.
wow.
And they, I mean, they stepped right up to the plate and did it, because they have some nice property.
What was the highest price point again, Rich?
I think it was about 140.
Wow,
Yeah,
Wow.
wow.
it was huge.
Amazing.
It's right out on the point, and I think they had to pull everything, they had to pump it back out,
Uh,
I believe. That one I don't know personally, it's just
hmm.
hearsay, I guess. The one I know personally is 90,000.
They've gone up in price.
Depends what you gotta do with it. They all have to push uphill.
A pumping station too, yeah. The pumping stations can get a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
So some of the things too is, with community systems, we've been looking into, there are definitely models of community systems in other communities. I think what was brought up was the Thompson's Point one. If there are other ones that you have questions about, let us know. We're starting to look into, where some of these are too. I think there's one that was mentioned about in Shoreham. And then another one in Addison County,
Okay.
so.
You guys set for the time being? Yes, sir? All right. Thank you, Sarah. I know, we could keep you here for hours, but we're not going to.
Not tonight.
Not tonight.
Okay.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the minutes of April 2, please?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
and I got one correction.
Thank you, Rebecca.
There's a word in there, I don't think it's a word.
A word that's not a word?
I think you mean consensus. Paragraph 3, 4th line from the bottom, the commission was in
Yeah.
consensus.
Consus.
Something.
Consus.
I think you mean consensus.
This is a spelling correction. Still get those great proofreader skills, Rebecca.
I read it.
So first page?
Yep,
Yeah,
paragraph,
oh, it's highlighted. Okay, fixed.
all those in favor with the correction? Aye?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. So,
And just very quickly,
Yes.
I had you
Sure.
sign the draft of the February ones before, so I'm going to also forward around the February ones so that you can sign. I've attached, well, there. These haven't changed at all, I just took the draft off that was printed
Oh, I
across
see.
them.
Yep. So you get to the great planning and zoning reports. I love the new format. I see that every week, every month. And in the future agendas, we've already spoken about May 7th and May 20th, which is a Monday. And then in June, we revert back to our usual Tuesday, first and third Tuesday
Except in July,
in July, sorry.
we're going to look to have your second meeting that last week of July. And if there are any other accommodations that we can make, I think
You don't sign
moving
that.
into the summer and sort of the topics at hand, if we need to move meetings around so we don't
Hey,
lose
Mark,
quorum,
pass your pen
or at
roll
least the
with the
majority,
notes, please.
Sure, it's pretty perfect.
Since I am pen short.
let us know.
So did you guys hear that? If we have to move meetings around so we can keep quorum, let Sarah know so we can adjust accordingly, because it's all hands on deck till we get through this new assignment. And we really need everybody here, so we all hear the same thing all the time, because it's gonna move fast. And we're gonna have people coming in, and I want all this on the same page, hearing the same thing. All right. That's the lecture for the night. Lecture concluded.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
There it is. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Rich. Meeting is adjourned at